Knowing when to descend below DA, DH, or MDA on an approach is usually pretty easy because we typically just memorize what's in the regulation. But have you ever thought about how that applies to the actual approach? So let's start out by just looking at the regulation 91.175. And in there, first off, they say that the approach minimums are the highest of either what's published on the chart, what's prescribed for the PIC, or what's prescribed for the aircraft equipment. So the first one's pretty easy. We know and we usually use what's on the chart, but for the PIC, what does that mean? Well, when you go on to a 135 or a 121, or if you're a 121 or 135 pilot already, there's such thing as a high minimums captain. And what that says is essentially if you don't have 100 hours as PIC in type for that type of operation, well, you have to increase your minimums by 100 feet and a half respectively. And then for the aircraft equipment, sometimes in your AFM or your supplemental equipment for that aircraft, or in the op specs, the minimums may need to be increased by limitations on that equipment. So it always has to be the higher of whichever one that is. Now, in order to descend below DA, DH, or MDA on an approach, you have to meet three things. Number one is you have to be in a position where you can make a normal descent under normal maneuvers for landing. And then for 121 and 135, you have to land within a certain part of the runway. What they don't want you doing is breaking out on that approach, yanking the power back, slamming the flaps down, and then side slipping all the way to the runway. That would not be a normal descent under normal maneuvers. And if for some reason you had an incident or an accident or an occurrence, you could be in violation of 91-175. The second thing is you have to have the flight visibility. Flight visibility is not the same as ground visibility. Flight visibility listed under 1.1, which those definitions are applicable here, says it's the horizontal distance from the cockpit for you to see ground references during the day and lighted ground references at night. So if at any point after you've broken out and you see your reference to the runway, if you lose that because your in-flight visibility is gone, you have to go missed. And then lastly is the slew of items that they list in there for the runway environment. So basically, if you break out or you see the approach lighting system, but the approach lights are all you see, you can continue down to 100 feet above the touchdown zone elevation. You cannot continue any farther unless you have either the red terminating sidebars, the red side row bars, or those list of items, the runway environment, the touchdown zone items, or the threshold items. When you are briefing your approach next time, don't just skim over and discard your touchdown zone elevation, because that may be helpful and beneficial to you, especially if the weather is extremely low. You may need to calculate 100 feet above that touchdown zone elevation. And the second piece is understand what those approach lights are giving you, because sometimes those approach lighting systems don't include the red terminating sidebars or the red side row bars. And so that information, you can say, well, we don't even need to worry about that. We're going to have either the runway, the threshold, or the touchdown zone items, because we're not going to have those red side row bars in sight for this approach. Let me know if this helps you out. I'll see you next time.